You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlehuber here with Michelle Witte.
That's me.
Get ready to go against the grain. Lots to cover over the next hour, including whether you are destined to rent your home for your entire life. We'll also talk about Forbes being real mad at the cost of a new federal holiday. And we remind you all why everyone hates Congress. I'm just kidding. Everybody remembers. We don't have to remind.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're going to talk about it. That's what we're going to do. We have all that. And at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we trash the worst of this week in our weekly Working for the Weekend segment, including a cop, Michelle, wanting to be a sheriff in a county near my home of Rockford, Illinois. That story starts in Rockford, so you're going to want to catch that out at 1:30. And we'll talk about Subway founder Fred DeLuca gets trashed for his fake bread and his semi-nude executive calendars.
I'm sorry, the fake bread bad, semi-nude executive calendars, it could be some positive stuff happening there.
Not if it's from your creepy boss who's like, hey, here's a calendar with half-naked photos of me, when you're like, I'm at the workplace, and you're like, no.
All right,
they're not like firemen that are like in your community raising money for like a Dalmatian or something. There's
I'm not as mad as you want me to be.
There's no good. Okay, that's going to get weird. At 1:30, I was going to say, keeping it less weird.
One of my college friends, you want to hear a weird story? I'll let you introduce Steve, and then I'm going to tell you both a weird story.
Steve Grumbine's going to hear a story here from Michelle Witte. Right. Steve is the founder and the CEO of the nonprofits Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action, and the host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. Steve, welcome to the show and story time with Michelle Witte.
I'm looking forward to it. Let's make it rain.
It's just on the topic of, so back when I was in college, I had to stop by and see a professor during office hours for some reason. It was just a really quick question. And I went to his office on my way from the gym. And so I apologized. I was like, hey, just got a quick question, handing this thing over. Sorry, just coming from the gym. I'm all sweaty. You know, apologies. Whatever. It was like disheveled looking.
Oh,
so
I'm
I
all
just
sweaty.
said, apologies,
Sorry,
coming from
glistening.
the gym.
Okay.
And he was like, oh, you like to work out? Let me show you a picture of my wife. And he like opens his drawer, pulls out a picture of his wife, and she was a bodybuilder.
Oh.
She was like a professional bodybuilder. So she's like, I mean, looks great. Yeah. She's obviously a very good bodybuilder in this extremely small bikini thing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, cool. Good for you, buddy. And I forget what else happened, but it could have been, but I was like, he's just celebrating his wife. Yeah. And then suggesting that maybe then I realized he was also pretty muscly under his shirt.
Yeah, something.
I was like, don't recruit
over
me to this. I don't want to be part of it.
I had a middle school teacher, Steve, who was a bodybuilder, and she showed us video competition. And for us 12-year-olds, seeing our gym teacher in the skinny bikini outfit was just all too much for us to handle.
Yep.
Steve Grumbine, do you hit the weights? You know any bodybuilders in your life?
You know, back in the day, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, that day's long past.
No, it's not. You can always go back. I just went back to the gym last month. My goal, Michelle, I tried. I'm close. 3 pull-ups so I can go rock climbing with you.
Hey, way to go.
I know.
I can only do.
It's awful because I used to be able to way more.
You don't have to be able to do pull-ups to be a good climber. All right, let's get to this. I want to get to this nation of renters, harrowing Bloomberg opinion piece. So I'm glad you're here. to walk us through this, Steve. So, yeah, Bloomberg has an opinion piece out yesterday. It's called America Should Become a Nation of Renters. And, it makes the argument that homeownership, man, it's silly. It's holding you back. It's tying you down. You need the freedom and the fluidity of never being able to accumulate any kind of savings or wealth in your life, right? And basically, the arguments that it's making are the same kind of arguments that are used to justify gig work, right? Which makes me think the housing market is really just following trends we are seeing elsewhere, right? Because what is gig work if not just renting labor? And what are streaming services if not just renting entertainment? So why should we own anything at all? It sets the stage by saying soaring real estate prices and a housing shortage are stoking fears that home ownership, which is the real ticket to the American dream, is moving out of reach of low and moderate income workers. And it has some statistics to back this up, saying Homeownership peaked at 69% in 2004, but the rate has fallen every year since until 2016. It rebounded a little bit in 2020, but this rebound is likely to be stopped by a housing market that is desperately short on supply and seeing month-over-month price increases greater than they were in the frenzied market of 2006, which all sounds bad. But then he says, no. This is just the liquefaction of the housing market. And he spends the rest of the piece, the author does, arguing that the reason for the housing shortage is basically financially conservative homeowners. And so now that institutional investors are increasingly entering the housing market, which means they are buying up whole neighborhoods of homes, we're getting more development and we'll get more units because they want rental volume. And isn't that great? So he concludes by saying it's good that homeownership is out of reach now because rentals mean you can move around more and you can make housing choices based on your lifestyle and your life cycle. And the U.S. is a frontier nation. We're just getting back to our roots. And it's all pretty transparent to me, Steve. I wonder what you make of this and what's going on in his arguments here.
Well, first things first, he's got a fundamentally market-driven mindset. So naturally, he is a salesman for the neoliberal view of renters and rent-seeking and, rentier class and the further financialization of our entire existence. And the buying up of properties by groups like Blackrock and other pension plans that are buying up homes as part of their strategy for filling out their investments. And it should be terrifying because, I know that this will seem a bit like a paradigm shift, but I think it's actually worth taking a step back for a minute and realizing that a lot of these homes, they're owned by asset managers. Mm-hmm. Asset managers want to make those assets increase. And, if you followed our work with the Con and the new Untouchables, you know that states and local municipalities and stuff try to elevate the appraisal values of homes because they need the rental, they need the tax revenues, and those tax revenues are based off of asset values.
Yep.
So there's this whole thing that starts at somewhere way far away from any concept of home ownership, way far away from evaluating whether someone is a credit-worthy risk. And it's all in the name of inflating asset values because they know at the end of this, I'm talking at the beginning right there, but at the end of this, we have witnessed time and again that the Federal Reserve's emergency spending and so forth will backstop their losses.
Yeah.
They will find a way to take those losses off the book. However, HOPA, which was a plan that would have allowed the Federal Reserve to help keep people in their homes versus actually foreclosing on them, Alan Greenspan came right out and said point blank, I'm not going to ever do one of these, period. I don't care what the law says. We will never do one of these.
Yeah.
So this is a consolidation, and it has nothing to do with the goodness or the betterness for a regular Jane and Joe public. This just elevates the prices out of reach, and it literally renders the American dream even more so the American nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. This report comes just a week after we got that ProPublica report on the taxes that the wealthiest Americans actually pay, and, which made the argument that, one of the reasons why the wealthy can legally get away with paying so little in tax is that their wealth is housed in assets rather than in their actual income. And made the point that, the only realistic way most Americans have to accumulate wealth is through owning a home. Like, that's your one big asset, and you hope that it appreciates in value, and then you're not relying on your income to be your sort of savings, to be your backdrop, especially because incomes are taxed so much more highly. So it just completely ignores this fact that, I don't think you have to be a sort of You don't have to be conspiratorially minded to see that if everybody is renting and this one avenue toward accumulating wealth is shut off from people, it's just making a more precarious and a more potentially desperate class of workers who can never actually stop, because you can never stop working because you always got to pay your rent.
That's right. And I want you to think about this, too. So, you see countries that buy and sell goods and services in the United States, and they, in turn, are investing in properties. They're buying up properties. And you've got others that are buying up properties, and they're not doing anything other than sitting on them, trying to rent them out and driving the price of rents up, driving the prices of the asset itself up. And one of the key things that I think that anybody that really wants to reverse this trend is going to focus on, if they haven't already started, they should immediately begin starting. Mm-hmm. And that is a land value tax. It's an old Georgism concept, and many of them would call this a single tax solution, getting rid of income tax and putting it on the land value. And by swapping your tax structure over to land value, that means that those individuals that own property have choices. They either A, improve their property and make it useful, or B, they get hit with huge taxes they can't get out of. And so this prevents people, like Chinese investors coming and buying up half of Manhattan or, whatever, and just sitting on those properties. And by doing, they would ultimately be bled out of their properties and they would be forced to sell. And that would in turn drive the price down, which would keep home ownership attainable. But home ownership was never intended for everyone. Mm-hmm. Home ownership should only be for those who truly can afford it. And just think about this, to go back to my point of asset inflation, okay? When you're an investor, you want that asset to appreciate in value. When you're a homeowner, you want that asset to appreciate in value. Mm-hmm. If you're an investor and you have no attachment to that home and you're just trying to drive the price of that up, that literally is a destabilizing activity, and it should be regulated right out of existence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, as our producer pointed out, you can also see homeownership itself as like a bit of a pyramid scheme. You're just sort of trying to grab the lowest rung and then hope that your home, that its value increases to put it out of reach of more people, which is true, right? It's a true observation. But I feel like you can't. The beginning of stopping this process is not for everybody to rent. You know what I mean? The beginning of stopping changing that situation is for us to have a completely different sort of economic and social system that means you're not sort of relying completely on yourself to take care of yourself in your old age or whatever. We need to live in a system that is less precarious for everyday people before we can start, talking about eliminating homeownership as an aspiration. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, Steve, is the piece says financialization changed the housing market forever. And I wonder if you could speak to what he's talking about. Is he talking about, I guess, obviously the process of packaging and selling mortgage debt, which got us into the 2008 financial crisis? That's what I'm assuming he's discussing. But then if he's just flat out saying it, it implies that our response to 2008 was completely inadequate, which of course we've talked about on the show before, but that, if we're still seeing the effects, then you'd think this would be time for if Bloomberg is seeing it, surely, it speaks to a need for the government to come in and continue this cleanup that it never really finished from 2008.
All right, so let's go a little bit further than that, right? You talk about the financialization of the economy. And what is happening is these large investment banks, like we've talked about, you see BlackRock buying up houses all over the place, okay? Mm-hmm. And naturally, because they want to drive up that asset value, you've got bankers on the backside of that bundling these mortgages for yet again another return. All of that CDO debt swap, all of that stuff is still going on. Mm-hmm. Nothing has changed. And let me take it a step further than that so you really, really get the big picture here, okay? Not only has nothing changed, but when you starve the enforcement of those regulations, of actually auditors, enforcement officers, people that are industry savvy and understand the technical rules that they put in there, they make these things as absolutely complicated as possible. Ensure that by volume and complexity, they can continue the control fraud that they're doing. They know that these houses aren't worth what they are. And the more they inflate that value, the more only the select few can buy, the more the rest of us are gigafied into home ownership and renting. And then what happens with rent? It's like UBI. The landowner, the renter, has control over the price.
Yeah.
If you don't want to pay the price, then somebody else will, and now you'll be homeless.
Yep.
So this is a total capitulation to capital once again. And I really hope that folks take a step back and think this is not just about houses and values going up. This is about an entire business model that brought us to our knees in 2008 and is continuing to this day.
Yeah.
Just thank goodness our financial industries and our government aren't intermingled, because it would make like BlackRock executives, if they somehow found themselves in government power. Steve, could you imagine?
Did I laugh there? I'm serious. I mean, this right here.
I mean, it's absurd.
Understatement of the century is absolutely the understatement of the century, because you go back to the Robert Rubins and the Paulsons and all the Geithners, all of these people, the Holders, the Eric Holders. I mean, every one of these individuals is in the revolving door. They go to Citibank 1 minute, they come into the government the next minute, back to Citi the next minute. They're at J.P. Morgan 1 minute, they're in the government, then they're back to J.P. Morgan the next minute.
Yeah.
They're countrywide, you name it. And this revolving door, I mean, if I told you some of the stuff that I found out, I mean, like literally, they found out that people would be doing discovery to find out how they could win their homes back or to prevent from being foreclosed on and so forth. And so what did they do? They took away the ability for auditors to review and plaintiffs to review the documents at the federal level. So what did they do? They went to the state level so that they could get discovery. Well, they closed the window on the states. And then when they started realizing there was fraud, they pushed all the discovery out 5 years, because the statute of limitation is 5 years. Each step along the way, collusion between government and finance has set us up for this moment. And we've all been sleepwalking because it is complex.
Yeah. And the ones that don't make it through the revolving door, I think, trip over their own feet and end up writing at Forbes.
Yeah.
Michelle is my guess here based on this article I wanted to share here, because, Steve, this article, man, just some people just must just be the biggest party crashers ever. But anyways, obviously a lot of controversy over this new holiday, Juneteenth, which happens on Saturday, which has been something that people have celebrated for a long time in this country, but vast majority, especially of us white people, have never paid attention to and we're not aware of. And so it's kind of catching a lot of people off guard, especially the ways in which Joe Biden kind of suddenly introduced it and it just became a thing. And there is a lot of deep cynicism, especially on the left, that this is not nearly enough, which obviously this is nothing. This is just a holiday. This is not policy or the changing of resources or capital whatsoever. So let's not fool ourselves with thinking what a holiday could do or what comes along with the holiday bill or package. And it surely will teach us something and raise the public consciousness around these issues. So let's just take it for the moment. But I did want to just rip on some of those on the right and those at Forbes that are against it, because they're big mad. Forbes today with the headline, with Juneteenth, federal employees now get 44 paid days off each year. And they're not celebrating it. It was with scorn, because the article reads in part that Juneteenth now makes 44 paid days off for the average federal employee annually, which is nearly 9 full weeks of paid time off each year. But it says before Thursday, federal employees received pay for 10 federal holidays, 13 sick days, and 20 vacation days, to the estimate cost to taxpayers $22.6 billion annually. And the cost of this new federal holiday, for each holiday, it costs roughly $818 million. Then Forbes just scares with this line. Already this year, the U.S. House passed H.R. 1 for the PEOPLE Act, which, among other things, would add Election Day as yet another paid holiday every 2 years for congressional and presidential elections. It has a $4 billion cost over 10 years. And in March, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 included a new $500 million perk. Federal employees with kids out of school are eligible for $1,400 per week for 15 weeks to stay home. And a new $570 million account at Treasury was established to fund the benefit. And then, Steve, the article drops this line. Is this France?
Is this France?
Oh, my God.
So that's the tone in which you need to read, because this big conclusion of all this spending and all these holidays is this France? Oh, is this France?
Yeah, I don't know. Is your car on fire outside? No, I guess it's not.
No, yeah.
It's just kind of amazing to me. First of all, I know this plays well with people, but the absolute, ignorance of the whole concept of this will cost taxpayers is probably the worst of all things. Because first of all, it's like hate your neighbor. Your neighbor's getting a day off.
Yes.
But more importantly, though, it furthers the idea that we can't do anything until we've received your tax dollar. It literally is costing us. It's destroying our nation. It's breaking us.
Yeah.
And the humor of all that is completely gotten rid of when you realize the deleterious effects of that are that people start wondering, oh, my God, can we afford another holiday?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Or to give them a holiday? Oh, my God, this is going to bankrupt the nation. What are we thinking?
Yeah.
And this kind of thinking is still alive and well in this country, even though Yarmuth yesterday, I don't know if you all caught this. I was hoping you'd bring me on for this subject, but Yarmuth, head of the banking committee, came out and flat out gave a dissertation on C-SPAN about the fact that the deficit myth by Stephanie Kelton is the book to read and how afford to do any of this. But this is the head of the banking committee. So some chances of some of these fixes, we're starting to get some people in Congress that know what's happening. Maybe they'll actually be able to regulate a proper holiday, and maybe they'll actually be able to regulate proper enforcement of the housing industry and finance. So,
yeah.
Who knows?
Just also the idea, again, when you just look at to step away from finance and economics for a minute and just look at the reality of holidays around the world. The U.S., no maternal leave, no mandated federal holidays, no paid leave mandated, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't make our productivity any better. It doesn't, lots of other countries around the world are doing just fine mandating paid leave that is multiples beyond anything that people get in this country. So it's just false on its face. All you have to do is look across the pond to see that it's absolutely fine to give everybody 5 weeks off. Your country's still going to be okay. You can still, it's
you
just
give them 11 weeks off and 3-day work weeks. I mean, you could do all kinds of stuff.
But no, in America, you have to save up all your sick leave to have a baby and then never take a vacation for the next couple of years. It's absolutely actually just disgusting. And the only way that this system is perpetuated is because we have a news media that is unable to see outside our borders and do any of the kind of comparative reporting that would maybe get people fired up about some of these issues. And instead, it's just like, stop whining, you PMC loser. Like, it's not, you shouldn't talk about things like vacation.
You're making the big mistake of thinking the media serves us. I mean,
yes.
It's a propaganda wing of the oligarchy. And there's 5 groups that own the media, period. I mean, that's about as monopolistic and consolidated as you can get. And they don't serve us. They don't serve our needs. Propaganda is what they sell.
Yeah.
And, so if you're looking for news, you're getting nothing but disinformation every time you turn that nonsense on.
It's true.
You don't have that's it.
Well, I was about to do the nonsensical pivot to ask you about Joe Manchin, but I think it would probably be more important to talk about what John Yarmuth did have to say. Tell us a little bit more about his comments, Steve.
So John Yarmuth was brought on to C-SPAN yesterday, and if you look at Stephanie Kelton's Twitter feed, yesterday was basically...
And I just want to just note, people, Democratic House Budget Committee chairman. So again, when we always focus on the Manchins of the world, and he's like the chairman of this very important budget committee, gets very little play.
Absolutely. This was one of the most amazing things. And I'm still getting goosebumps from it. This probably seems nerdy to y'all, but just understand that the head of this committee, this major banking, this is a budgetary guy that focuses on these things. And he is saying straight up, we are a currency issuing nation. We don't have to worry about that. We can afford any of it. Mm. And I have never in my life heard someone tell the truth, other than that one moment where Alan Greenspan accidentally told the truth because he was one up by an even worse parasite in Paul Ryan. Yeah. And that's the only reason why he actually told the truth, where he was like, well, we can afford anything. It's not a matter of the money. It's a matter of, do we have the real resources? But Yarmuth came out and straight up said the entirety of the progressive agenda is easily paid for. All these things easily paid for. And it was a moment of celebration. Now, the question will be, why didn't media pick up on this? Really, why didn't media pick up on it? And I can't answer that question. I mean,
I think you answered it previously. You know what I mean? I think you answered it before because again, it's a media that sells us self-help books by billionaires about how to be a better person and how to make money. It's obviously a con.
And they also sell us the Squad. And it's not anything to do with the Squad, but it's a way in which they are able to capture that and it's the progressive movement that's taking place right there. And then basically just confines any progressive conversation to those 5 Congress members and John Yarmuth.
To culture, I think. And I think this is part of it. And to culture and to ignore the economic, arguments and labor arguments and have people, continually fighting sort of niche culture war battles.
Yeah. John Yarmuth, an old white guy, doesn't fit into the picturesque Squad, does he, Steve?
It's funny you say that because, we celebrated. There was a picture that was taken in a New York City pizzeria with Stephanie Kelton, Pavlina Chernova, AOC, Andres Bernal, and a few others from the Sunrise Movement. And then shortly thereafter, there was a picture of AOC standing there with Andres Bernal with the MMT textbook by Bill Mitchell and Randall Wray. And then shortly thereafter, she came out there and there was a Business Insider article that she was heavily quoted in saying that MMT must be part of the discussion for how we move forward with the progressive agenda to pay for it. And then, as if that wasn't good enough, then she came out and she took on Jerome Powell in hearings with the Fed, where she basically dismantled not only the Phillips curve, but a lot of the other myths and legends that the Fed typically had neoliberally rained down on us. So you would think, wow, AOC, right? John Yarmuth literally jumped over her with what he did yesterday. He literally took all that and said, I am the MMT guy now. And of all the places to be right there in that budget area, what a blessing. I mean, you could be a Democrat hater. I get it completely. They've earned all your scorn. They've got a lot of mine. But to ignore this victory right here, a lot of us have been working for many, many years to try and get to this point. And a really big deal. So celebrate with me.
No, absolutely. And obviously, I guess I'm curious. What happens next? And you wonder if these people see the thing breaking around them, which they have to. And Yarmuth has to say, look, this isn't right. What's happening here? And we have to try to get ahead of it. If it's not covered by the mainstream media, if you don't obviously get senators and the president don't allow this to actually get to their desk, what happens if we don't actually start changing our conversation? I think is one question I think I have for you, Stephen. I just want to, with the other, appreciate your all's work, because I think what we get lost in with media is everything's a conversation between the left and the right. We can never actually have internal debates within the left, which is what we need to have to move things forward. And I think that's what the media also gives us this false notion. Hence, we have a show called Political Misfits that is either the red or the blue.
Yeah.
And that's just so absurd. And then it stagnates our ability to learn.
Absolutely. Let me just tell you, we had a debate here recently, and this may seem benign at first. It may seem even technocratic until you understand everything that I've said on this show, as in previous visits. We've been fighting with various progressive entities that have been trying to advance state-based healthcare, state-based programs at a major level. Well, as you well know, the states, their revenue has dried up. The states are cutting pension programs. The states are not funding schools properly. They're making sweetheart deals with the fracking industry to try and fund public utilities. This is a very, very serious problem. But yet the progressive movement, because they don't pay attention to economics, goes ahead and says, wow, we got this really cool idea, totally for sure. Why don't we totally Statebased? For sure and stuff, right? Gag me with a spoon. And you're like, but do you understand that the states are like you and I? They don't have the ability to create currency. So the idea of what happens if you had a Medicare for all in your state and we have a pandemic? How are you negotiating through that? How are you handling the funding for that? What programs are you going to eliminate? What roads are you not going to plow to be able to afford that? Are you going to tell people, I'm sorry, you're going to have to now pay for your health care? What does that mean? And I don't think that people think through these problems. And of the states in this country that could actually pull something like this off, maybe you have California, maybe you have New York, maybe Washington State, or you look at these major economies, the average flyover state, as they would say, the landlocked states, none of them could afford this. And many of them see this as, Joseph Stalin coming to force them into health care. So, unfortunately, it's a big, ginormous lose across the board, when in reality, you all see, at least I hope you see, that the left needs to understand the currency issuer is the federal government, and that we need to start making them do things for us instead of thinking that it's all tax-driven. And the states, they're drying up. Why? Because the federal government's not spending. It's literally farming the stuff out so that the Blackrocks of the world can rent to us instead of helping the homeowners stay in their homes.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier in New York, right? There was a bill to create a single payer system in New York State that wasn't brought for a vote, even though it had the support of a bunch of legislatures. And we just sort of mentioned that, the fact that it wasn't brought out of the Democratic legislature for a vote. But yeah, I think we do have to really figure out what problems can be solved and can be addressed on the state level and what problems can be addressed on the federal level. And there is, I think, there's so much desire to get some kind of win, get some kind of win somewhere. You want to keep the wind in your sails. You want to feel like things are achievable. And I have some sympathy for people who think, well, we can get things done on the local level. We can get things done on the state level. But as you say, sometimes when it comes to resourcing major initiatives like this, again, if we are like if the states are like us with having to deal with like actual exchange and stuff like that, not being currency issuers, it's a very difficult proposition, and one that, you don't want to set it up and then have it fail and have people use that as an example of why something like this can't work.
Oh no, Steve
just punching his phone in agreement.
Sheer rage, I thought.
That was at joy.
Oh no, Steve, you're breaking up on us. Lost the connection.
You hear me?
There you go.
Okay. So what I was saying is that, if you think about this, right, if we wanted a job guarantee, if we want a Medicare for all these things kind of work together. They're not like standalone orphan politics. These are all part of a collaborative, cohesive thing, because if you give a job guarantee, but you don't have Medicare for all, now what are you doing for health care? And the whole idea of the job guarantee is to relieve these pressures from the business community so that they're not pushing that down on we the people, that we can have that funded through the federal government. But if you do it piecemeal, you miss the point of the relationship between each of these initiatives, and they are very, very tightly woven together. So I think that it's really important to think, and the left makes economics the last thing they talk about as opposed to the first thing they talk about. And that's why we keep getting our rumps kicked. Yeah. And it's a shame, but I'm hoping that programs like yours that really help elevate this stuff, we got a chance, hopefully the listeners start, thinking about this, taking it to their local political organizing that they do and start talking about it. Make this part of what you talk about in your meetings. Don't let the MMT story go to waste. This is super important and it's time.
Yeah. Well, you all do some great work at all your different platforms. Steve Grumbine, let us know where our listeners can go to find your different podcasts. And I was also told by some mutual friends of ours here in the chat that we should also ask you about the book club.
Yes. So, we have a book club going on right now with Pavlina Chernova's Case for a Job Guarantee. It's on Thursday nights, and our team did a great job last night. The first one was anybody can sign up, and if you show up for at least two of the, I think, 4 meetings, you get a free copy of the book sent to you.
Hey, there you go.
The other one is we have, obviously, Macro and Cheese, our podcast, has been just blazing, kicking some major butt. And you can find that on our website at realprogressive.org under media, the media drop down, and go to Macro and Cheese and check out all the episodes right there with transcripts and show notes and extras. And also, we are in the process. We've just filmed 12 new episodes of the new Untouchables for season 2. And I mean to tell you, we've got folks like Dennis Kucinich coming on. We got folks like Thomas Frank. We've got big names, Michael Perino, who wrote the book Hellhound of Wall Street. We've got huge, and then on top of it, not to be outdone, we have incredibly important victim stories that will be drawn out, including a gold medalist, Olympian, who lost her home to identity theft. process as well. So don't sleep on us. You can find the new Untouchables, the Pecora files, at realprogressives.org under the media drop down as well.
So you mentioned Dennis Kucinich running for mayor of Cleveland again. There in other news. Steve Grumbine, as always, thank you so much for your time.
You got it. Have a great day.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. With that, we had to quick break before coming back with the worst of the week. Yeah. Listen to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik. We're live in D.C., and we're back after this.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.